Recently, I recorded a video as to why I take images, and I sort of asked you the same question. Why do you take images? And I got a fair amount of comments, and I came up with, well, I like the technical aspect of photography, and I like to create memories for myself and for others. And I thought, well, that's the end of it. Little video, put it out there. It's gotten some views, some comments. Yay. And then Tony happened. Tony writes a comment about, is it really good enough just to know those reasons? Maybe you should think about why they are the reasons. So I commented back that, Tony, you made my brain hurt. You really did. But you made me think. So here's another video. And by the way, Marcus never makes me think this hard. So thanks, Tony. Hey, welcome to another video. Yes, I was teasing with Tony, okay? Don't get upset. I'm just teasing. But it is true, Marcus, he never makes me think this hard. But it did make me think. I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Thanks, Tony. And I had to keep thinking about, well, why are those the reasons? I know the analytics of my channel. I know what videos get watches, which ones don't, which ones get comments, the average watch time, the percentage of likes. I can study my analytics. And I already know this video is not going to be one of those that gets a lot of views. And that's okay, because sometimes I need to make videos like this that just answer someone's question, or maybe something that really made me think and I decided to record it. Sometimes I get comments about, hey, that was really personal and I appreciated it. Hey, that made me think and I appreciated it. And so I know that there are a couple of people that do appreciate when I get a little self-reflective in my videos. So maybe this one is for that smaller group of people as opposed to the, what's my favorite Nikon lens, or what's the best lens I own group that will get me thousands of views and okay, we move on. So this is a video for you who appreciate when I have to think a little bit about my videos. It made me think back to college, and I went to a Christian Brothers college, LaSalle University. And in order to graduate, I had to take 2 philosophy classes and 2 religion classes. It was just part of the classes you had to take. And about the only thing I remember from my philosophy classes were they were late in the afternoon and I couldn't wait to get them done so I could go over to the gym and play basketball. If I sat on the one side of the room near the window, I can look out and get a really good view of downtown Philadelphia skyline. And the third thing was, I think, therefore I am, which is a pretty heady thing for a 19-year-old. It's a pretty heady thing for someone in their 60s. And maybe I didn't appreciate it back then, and I was thinking about wanting to go over to the gym and play basketball more than trying to get an A in philosophy. Happens when you're 19. And I had to take a religion class, and I can't really say it was a religion class, though it was. And a lot of the class was surrounded, you had to read a book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. I don't know whether you've ever read that book or not, but it's a pretty powerful book. I read it in college, and I again read it a few years later after college. And it might be the only book that I still have that I used in college. It's down on my bookshelf somewhere, and I don't even think it's my version. I think it's my wife's version because she had to take the same class. But if you haven't read that book, it's a pretty interesting read. Victor was in a Nazi concentration camp, and he had to try to figure out what the meaning of his life was. You know, how could he get through and survive this concentration camp? And I realized, thinking about the reasons why I take photographs are nowhere near the level of, I'm in a Nazi concentration camp, how am I going to survive until tomorrow? Okay, I get that. But the point of the class, I'm sure, was to make you think about who you were and what your meaning of life would be. And in fact, at the end of the class, you had to write a paper. I think the title was, Who Am I? But that was the first time that I really had to think about, well, as a 19-year-old, what are my insecurities? You know, am I a leader or am I a follower? What do I like to eat? Am I creative? Am I not creative? You know, what type of person do I see myself in the future to be? And I have to admit that was one of my favorite classes in my college time. Even though I was an accounting major, I enjoyed that class. And the other class that really had an impact on me, when I was a senior, I took a psychology class. And I admit the only reason I got into that class as an elective was because I was president of my fraternity, and the instructor was the moderator of my fraternity, and I asked if I could get in that class, even though I was a business major and not a science major. That's how I got in the class. But that as well had an effect on me, because at the end of the class, the end of the year, and a lot of the class, you sat in a circle with, I don't know, 15, 18 people that were in the class. And our instructor, Dr. Jack Dondero, would introduce a topic, and then we would just talk about it in a circle for 3 hours, once a week for the whole semester. And at the end of the semester, you had to go, and you couldn't spend more than $1 or $2, whatever it was, I think $1, on any one person, and you had to buy them a gift and give them something that you learned about that person at the end of the semester. And I remember there was one female student, and during the year she was really upset because it was either her house or her apartment, wherever she was living in, had a fire, and a lot of her things were ruined. And so her gift from me to her was a key to her new apartment. And then there was another guy that all he wanted to talk about was the Philadelphia 76ers, and he was a big basketball guy. So I got him a photo of Dr. J, Julius Erving, his favorite player. The point was that I really put a lot of thought into who these people were and what I learned about them through the semester. And when it came time for them to reciprocate, every single person, even the guy who sat next to me, who was in my fraternity, who I thought knew me pretty well, who was my little brother in the fraternity, every single person gave me a sheet of accounting paper, because that's all they knew about me. And I was president of fraternity. I was a disc jockey on the school radio station. I was a resident assistant. I was in student government. I played almost every sport, intramural sport I could while I was there. I was the color commentator for the basketball games for the LaSalle basketball team. I did a lot. And yet the only thing people knew about me was, oh, he's an accounting major. Because I didn't talk a whole lot. I didn't tell them much about myself. And that kind of opened my eyes up to, you know, the type of person I was at the time. Even though I was outgoing and I did a lot of things, I didn't necessarily share that with a lot of people. So on this YouTube channel, it's sort of the same way. You know, what do you want to share? What do you not want to share? And so thanks to Tony, who says, well, maybe you ought to dig a little bit deeper. I thought back about those times in college where I was forced to then self-reflect. So when it comes to my photography, about why I do it, and I said, well, one of the reasons why is the technical side. That's an easy one to answer. I started out with film and in a darkroom, and my mentor, Tom McCartney, who I've mentioned many times in my videos, had a darkroom in his house, and he'd invite me over to his house. and we would trade. I would help him on his computer and make sure his computer was always running, and he'd let me use his darkroom, and he would teach me darkroom techniques. And we became such good friends that at the end of his life, I was the executor of his will. I was his health surrogate. And I was the one there when he passed away. And because he was a veterinarian, he took all his photography stuff, or a lot of it, from a scientific point of view. I mean, he really made me think about, well, what film are you going to use, and what developer works best with that film? How long should you develop it based on the result you want in the end? Nothing like the digital stuff now where you can go into Photoshop and just fix all that stuff. No, you had to do it in the darkroom. You had to do it when you're developing that film. You were forced to know that stuff. And then which paper do you want to get the look you want? And then do you want to, at the end, put a little selenium toning on it? And it will give the blacks maybe a little bit more of a bluish hue to them, but it will preserve your paper. At least that was the idea, I was told. And so because Tom always took it from such a technical point of view and made me think in technical terms, I'm just used to it. You know, it made me reflect every time I do something, even in Photoshop or with my lenses or with my camera bodies. You know, I take it from a technical side. Now, do I get that deep where, well, the reason why this lens looks the way it is because it has 5 elements and rather than 12 elements, and there's the light has less to travel through, less elements to travel through, so therefore it's not as diffused, or it's this or it's that. No, I don't take it from that side of it. I take it more from, okay, what's the look that I want with that Voigtlander lens versus a Nikon lens? And I've mentioned many times now that I've recently picked up the 75mm Voigtlander lens. And I will show you one photo. This I took with the 75. And I mentioned that, hey, I'll still use the 85, the Nikon. And here's an image I just took. This is the first one of 2025 that I worked up using the Nikon lens, the 85. So both lenses in my mind have a place, but I understand there's a little bit different look to them in the contrast. How I can make that 85, I can really make into black and whites pretty easily, I think. So as far as the technical side of it, that's what I mean by the technical side of it. Maybe it's more of a aesthetic, the way I see it, but to me, I still see that as technical. That is a big reason why I enjoy photography, because I do like puzzles. I like trying to keep my brain engaged. I get up every morning and read the paper, and most mornings I do the jumble before I'll even go and turn on my computer or anything else. I try to get my mind focused and working. And photography helps me do that. It's like a puzzle. And I've mentioned this many times as well. To me, people say, well, I've watched a lot of interviews with photographers, and they say, what's the most important thing you can learn in photography? And I'll bet a very large percentage of them, or at least the ones I've seen in interviews, they say composition. To me, composition is in the top 3, maybe the top 2. But to me, it's that exposure triangle. And again, it probably goes back to the technical side of learning film and learning the developer and how long you have to develop and how critical it was to get that exposure right on the film to begin with so that you could make your minor adjustments in the darkroom. So it's always been ingrained in me to get that technical side, get that exposure triangle right. Because if your exposure stinks, it doesn't matter what your composition looks like. It will be less of an image if you have a bad exposure. So to me, you start at the beginning. Get that exposure right. Really understand the exposure triangle, meaning the relationship between your ISO, your aperture, and your shutter speed based on your composition, what it is, your subject. What are you photographing? If you're photographing sports, that exposure triangle is likely going to be very different than if you're shooting a portrait or a landscape. Because a landscape, you're probably at f8, f5.6, f11, wherever. Portrait, you might be at f2, which is going to change your shutter and your ISO, quite possibly. Sports, you rely on your shutter. You know, you have to stop the action. So your aperture might be second in line and your ISO would probably be third as to the importance. But if you understand all that, you can get good exposure. So that's what I mean by the technical side of it, that I enjoy figuring that stuff out. The harder one was trying to figure out the memory side of it. And you know what, Tony, I'm sorry, I still might not have completely figured that one out. I've really thought about it. And the best answer I can come up with is ego. I just want to think I can do it better than the other people can. I realize I'm wrong for the most part. My daughter and my wife, they take their iPhones and they just go beep, 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 and they shove it in my grandkids' faces. And, you know, they a lot of times get the shot and get a better shot than I get. And I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but if you have a grandkid or if you have grandkids, pay attention to if their mother has that iPhone up and taking a picture and you have your camera up and taking a picture, they're looking at their mother. And so if you think you're going to get this little friendly picture of the three of them going, they're looking like this, they're not looking at you. Unless their mother says, look at you, Dad, look over there, you ain't getting the shot. Your daughter just got the better shot. But they don't get shots like this. That they don't get. And so I have to say that I get a different type of image than they do. And I have to be happy with that. I have to be able to stroke my ego and say, you know what, sometimes theirs is better. My son, you know, he gets all these pictures of him and his wife and his two sons at the beach, and they take all these great pictures, and I think, well, how come I can't get those pictures with them? You know, he does a better job at it, or maybe my daughter-in-law's the one taking the picture. I don't know, but they seem to get better pictures. And sometimes I go, what's wrong with me? You know, my ego takes a hit. And I try to improve and go, well, I'm going to show them the next time. The next time I see them, boy, I'm going to get the better picture. So I think to a large part, it's just ego. And the other thing that I realized when Tony made me think about it is boredom. I get bored. I need something to do. We used to have, my wife and I had season tickets for the Miami Dolphins for a few years. And I would always take my camera. Because I'd enjoy the game, I watched the game. But to me, the fun was taking the pictures so that I wasn't bored when it's 3rd and 12 and, you know, the coach runs the ball into the middle of the line and they punt. You go, what are you doing? You know, I just, rather than screaming, I just, let me take a picture of the running back running into the line because people aren't going to know it's 3rd and 12 and they've given up the possession. So once the Dolphins started giving me a hard time about bringing my camera in, even though it was under the legal limits, every week it was, not every week, but a lot of weeks it was just, well, is that lens too long? Is it's this, it's that? We don't really allow cameras. Really? Then how come the sign right there says you can as long as the lens is under 6 inches and this is a 6-inch lens? Well, that's a professional camera. Really? Your iPhone's a professional camera these days, pal. Get with it. So I got tired of fighting that, and my wife got tired of them, the Dolphins, taking away all the benefits of being a season ticket holder, and we gave up our tickets. That's sort of a side note, but it's somewhat out of boredom. When I go to their houses, and I like seeing my grandkids, but I need to keep busy. I need to do something. and taking pictures is what I like to do. And so I try to convince myself, hey, I could do it better than you. Why don't I be the one doing it? So it's an ego thing, it's a boredom thing, it's an enjoyment thing of, well, they're in the shade, they're sitting over there in the shade, what's my exposure have to be now? Well, now they're in the sun, what's my exposure have to be? Well, they've noticed that I'm taking a lot of pictures, maybe I should change a different lens and back off. And it's not just them. When I go on vacations, I look and say, what is the focal length that I use the most? What range? And I find that even with my landscapes or travel or wherever I'm at, it seems to be between about 38 millimeter and 58 millimeter, but really it settles in at around 40 to 45 millimeter. That's about where I take a large extent, or unless I'm doing a panorama. But even then, a lot of times I'll take that Nikon 24 to 120, set it at about 40 millimeter, and then shoot a panorama. So really I'm at 40 millimeter anyway. Occasionally I'll use a 20 millimeter lens and do a panorama. But again, that's the technical side of, even if I'm traveling, I go back and I review and go, well, where do I like taking photos? What focal length? I hope that answers the question. And I hope that I didn't bore you too much with self-reflecting things. And unfortunately, I didn't talk about my favorite lens. Boy, is it sharp. Every once in a while, I like to just make a video to answer somebody's question or let them know that they made me think. And so even though I'm teasing on Tony, I do appreciate it, Tony. Thank you for making me think, even though I lost half a night's sleep, thanks to you. Marcus never does that to me. All right, till next time, take good care. Thanks for watching. See you soon.